whatever.
Welcome to Casual Politics, Margaret Hodge. Thank you very much for accepting my request. I'm very grateful. You need absolutely no introduction. But first, please allow me to congratulate you on your re-election in Parliament. How disappointing was for you to get re-elected and not see your party part of the government?
Well, of course, hugely disappointing. It wasn't just that we didn't got beaten at the last hurdle. We got well and truly trashed, and it's left the Labour Party in a worse state than it's been in my living memory. And having now to reconstruct a party that can win power to pursue our values in government is a major challenge.
And in England, they were saying that Labour Party was too left-wing. In Scotland, they were saying that it was too right-wing. Which side are you on yourself?
I think that actually the whole argument was, did we have a credible economic message where we trusted on the economy? The answer was no, and did we have the right person leading us into the general election? And sadly again, the answer was no. So those for me were the key things. I think this sort of left-right analysis is not very helpful and not highly relevant in today's context.
And as long as I know, you're supporting Liz Kendall to become leader of your party. Why do you think that she's best placed to become the leader?
Because she's part of the future, not the past. Her strength is that she's not associated with any of our failures and mistakes of past times, as the other main key candidates are. Because she understands the enormity of the challenge that we have to face if we're to be successful in elections, because I think she's brave, because I think she's bold, and because I think she listens. So she has those leadership qualities which I think Labour needs.
Well, how come that she could look forward to the future when she wants to fight a 1997 election campaign?
I don't think she does.
But she said that she's a Blairite and we should
hasn't
go
said
back
that.
to her.
You've said that of her. She hasn't said that of herself. You're pigeonholing her in a way that I don't think she would accept herself.
And she said that part of the reason that Labour Party lost to Conservatives was that your party didn't understand people's lives and didn't share their values and their aspiration. Do you agree with her?
I think what I think she's saying, which we all feel, is that the programme that we've put forward, the credibility we had on the economy, the credibility of our leader was such that it just didn't build the majority, it didn't have the confidence of the majority of people. So we weren't talking to most people. We weren't talking to enough people. And certainly the extent to which elections are always won on the centre ground, that's where you win or you lose elections. When we talked about some of the things that are hugely important to a party whose basic ideology is that we're committed to equalising life chances and creating greater equality of opportunity in our society. But when we talked about food banks or when we talked about zero-hour contracts, those sort of things didn't touch the lives of most people in the centre ground, whose confidence we had to win to gain government.
Do you think that did your party speak up enough for aspiration, enterprise, and markets?
I think we were ridiculously anti-business, and we just shouldn't have been it. I mean, I just remember knocking on a door on a council estate in my own constituency, and the guy answered the door, and I said, I'm from the Labour Party, and he said, oh, I run a small business, I've got to vote Tory. And that presumption that because he was running his own business on a council estate in a not the most prosperous area of London, Barking and Dagenham, he had to vote Tory because he was running his business. It's just wrong. That we had to capture those people. Now that doesn't mean that we don't tackle some of the unfairnesses in the economy, and it doesn't mean that we don't tackle the failures in market capitalism. But you've got to be, again, on the side of people who deliver the growth, which enables you to have some of the prosperity you need to have the public spending to equalise life chances.
And you, as the chair of Public Accounts Committee, you did a remarkable job, and no one can deny it. But do you think because you clamped down on companies like Google, Starbucks, and many others, that people, they said that she's a Labour MP, so Labour, it's anti-business?
I don't think that's true at all, because that's not where we set the agenda. Remember, we were a cross-party committee with a majority of Conservatives on my committee, and all our reports, and particularly our work around tax and tax avoidance and evasion, really had the unanimous support of my committee. So there wasn't a partisan attempt there. The other thing is, were we anti-business? No, we weren't. We were pro-fairness. And actually, if you want real competition in your economy, you've got to stamp down on the unfairnesses which disadvantage British businesses and British jobs. So if Amazon can cut its prices because it operates out of Luxembourg and doesn't pay taxes, that's unfair on John Lewis, which is a British-owned business, employing British people, trying to compete on the same products that Amazon is selling. So it's actually for competition, for fairness, for British business, that drove a lot of our agenda on trying to get the multinationals to pay a fair share of tax on the profits they made from their activity here in this jurisdiction.
And your team, which was a cross-party, as you mentioned it, did a remark, because you wrote over 250 reports over 5 years. And do you now, because at that time it was a coalition government, do you think that now the tribal royalties may return, that now it's a Conservative majority government?
I think you make a really good point, and we'll have to wait and see. I think one of the reasons that people were more prepared to leave their tribal loyalties at the committee door and really think about the issue that we were considering was coalition government. I think that broke down some of the traditional tribal loyalties. We're now back into conventional majority government, and whether that'll impact on the way people behave in the select committee arena, time will tell. I hope that our triumphs in the last Parliament, and it wasn't just my select committee, it was other select committees as well. Think about the DCMS hearing of the Murdoch press, or think about the work that was on the Treasury Select Committee around the Banking Commission, or think about the Home Affairs Committee, for example, the role they played around the chairing of the child abuse inquiry into historic child abuse. All those things, committees showed really their power on holding the executive account. I hope that the bunch of MPs who are going to serve on new select committees in this Parliament will cherish that and build on it, because that's good for British democracy.
And why you don't want to remain, because as the chair, because you've done a remarkable job as the chair, why you don't want to remain, Margaret Hodge? Parliament need people like you to hold Parliament to account.
Well, it was really hard work. I worked very, very, very hard for 5 years, and I was a bit wary about committing myself for another 5 years. I have other things I want to do in my life, like write a book on the experience of the last 5 years. I think it's an important thing. It's taken me a long time to learn, but to quit while you're ahead, how people still want you and want you to be there, often when they're just waiting for the back to see the back of you. And then the other thing is, I was just beginning on the edge to feel that when issues came up, I'd been there before, I'd seen them before, and there was a slight feeling of déjà vu on it. And I think that would have meant that I'd lost some of the vibrancy of coming to an issue fresh. So it needs a fresh pair of eyes. I've got some really fantastic people going for the job this time. I'm not choosing between them, but they're all very capable. They've all got something to offer. So I hope they'll build on what we achieved, because I think Parliament needs it, I think the public want it, and I think our democracy can only be strengthened by a strong independent voice from the select committees.
And we already have the Father of the House in Parliament. Do you think that one day you'll be given the honorary title of Mother of the House
I don't think so.
or your service in Parliament?
I came in very late.
1994.
Yeah, 94,
Yes.
yeah. So I was already quite old by the time I'm not one of these young things. I think that's another issue that actually life is a long haul, not a quick sprint. And I think all the experience I had outside Parliament stood me in good stead, particularly in doing this job. So hopefully I can contribute in other ways. And I'm going to start by writing this book. So to see on my experience of the last
memoirs?
Pardon?
Your memoirs?
No. Just on the last 5 years of running the Public Accounts Committee and the lessons, public policy
that would
lessons.
Be amazing and fantastic.
Especially
for politics students.
I hope so.
Yes.
I hope so.
Yes.
I hope so.
And my last question, I know that you're in a rush, that what would be the challenges that the Conservative government would face over the next 5 years?
Well, I think the first thing is, if you look at where they cut expenditure over the last 5 years, they didn't do very well. They didn't really change the way they didn't do the radical transformation of services that is required if you're trying to cut spending as dramatically as they are to achieve more for less. And many of their savings came from either cutting pension entitlement, cutting pension contributions, freezing wages, or cutting welfare benefits. Very little came out of transforming public services. So that's a challenge they face. I think it's particularly potent in the health service. I always think the health service is the elephant in the room. We're not talking about 8 billion, which is the extra money needed. We're talking actually about 30 billion today, because there's a presumption that there's going to be 22 billion pounds of savings in the NHS. I don't know where they're coming from. And there's no fund there to kickstart the different services. So, care in the community, all those services are required if you're going to close some of the expensive hospitals. So there's a whole set of real challenges there. I also think they have a challenge in that they have brought the private sector into delivering public source services more and more. Over half the services now provided through your and my taxpayers' pound is provided from private sector. I think the accountability of those structures, the control is not good enough, and I think they've got to think of new ways of creating a much more transparent system so that we can really hold the private sector to account. And I think they're expecting to get a lot of money in through being tougher on tax avoidance. I'm glad that we succeeded in putting that on the agenda. I'm very sceptical that they know how they're going to get that money in, because they're cutting the staff to HMRC and they talk a little bit with forked tongue. So they're making it easier to avoid tax, whilst at the same set time saying they're going to clamp down on tax avoidance. I can't quite see them squaring that.
And look forward to see more from you, as now you're standing down as chair of Public Accounts Committee. But thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Good. Actually, we managed a lot on there.